right, here's a question for you. How's your college basketball bracket looking? Many people's are all busted down. Well, tonight Louisville and Michigan play for the championship in Atlanta. Louisville will be without sophomore guard Kevin Ware, who you may recall suffered a gruesome knee injury earlier in the tournament that stopped the game for several minutes and left an emotional impact on teammates, opponents, and fans. Ware was somewhat fortunate as he was diagnosed with a broken leg. But what happens to college athletes who suffer even worse injuries and are left to pay the insurance costs? The question raises many hot-button issues, including the long-debated one as to whether college athletes should receive monetary payments in addition to their scholarships. Joining us to discuss this are two college professors on the front lines of this issue. From Duke University, Professor Paul Haagen is the co-director of the Center for Sports Law and Policy, and from Boston College is sports law professor and expert on this issue as well, Warren Zola, a ACC school. And gentlemen, I want to thank both of you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Let me just ask both of you, when you saw the video, saw Kevin Ware break his leg so graphically during that game, and let's just start with you, Warren. What were the first thoughts that came to your mind?
Well, certainly the first thought that comes to your mind is obviously Kevin's well-being and his health and what's going to happen and how egregious it was. And then the second issue that cropped up to my mind is, of course, the rights of college athletes and, to some extent, how are they going to be taken care of? From what you hear, Louisville University is taking care of their athlete in ways that go beyond what is required in terms of health coverage and in terms of offering a scholarship, because athletic scholarships are offered on a year-to-year, and they have the legal right to pull it. So it always is concerning when a school has an option to do something as opposed to a legal requirement to take care of a college athlete. And that's, quite frankly, after you saw the horrific injury, what goes through my head.
Paul, and it's hard to imagine that there is a real limit to the amount of insurance that a college is obligated to provide for these athletes and their injuries. Talk about how inadequate the coverage is for players.
Well, I think the issue is really how inadequate are the requirements of coverage. The real issue will come in with long-term injuries. Most schools actually cover the immediate surgery, the immediate care. When we're dealing with matters that have long-lasting effects, then the coverage is going to be dramatically less complete and effective, and that's where I think the real center of concern is.
Paul, you talked about, or I've read in some of the research that you talked about players who, if their families are not adequately insured, then the player and their family can be left with a really big bill. How far is there a general standard for universities about how much they will spend per player on an injury, for the medical care of that injury?
Well, the standards vary significantly. Again, I think that the biggest insurance problem is not the immediate care related to a specific injury, but the long-term debilitating effects of concussions, of injuries that will lead to hip replacements 10 years after they leave school, and then another part, which is loss of earning capacity, particularly athletic earning capacity coming out of an injury. That is not covered at all.
Warren, March Madness, of course, is front and center right now, but we could be talking about college football as well. There's any number of college sports, men's college sports, that generate millions of dollars for the universities and the various broadcast networks. What then is the argument for not having some of that compensation going to the players?
Well, I mean, I think that the argument, both legally and morally, is overwhelming that some level of compensation should make its way to the college athletes. If you're asking me to defend the NCAA's argument in terms of not paying, it basically comes down to the following. if we're forced to provide some level of compensation to these athletes, some of us may go out of business or may not be able to offer the same level of opportunities to all of our athletes. And quite frankly, from an economic or legal standpoint, that's perfectly fine. That is the free market system. And what's happened is this level of compensation has gone underground. And so you'll find college athletes figuring out ways to make money that violate rules, and that causes a whole another level of issues.
And we're talking about a lot of money here. I read in one report the NCAA basketball tournament itself, just this, generates $780 million annually. NCAA football, over $1 billion. So it almost seems egregious that some of that money doesn't go to the student athletes.
I'm not quite sure why you use the term almost. I think it is. And let's be clear about college athletics. It primarily is football and men's basketball that is generating revenue. Lacrosse, men's ice hockey, baseball, there are some other individual sports at individual schools that are generating that money. But for the most part, college athletics, outside of the realm of football and men's basketball, seem to be doing reasonably well. It's these two sports that generate so much revenue that is causing the public finally to become aware and question these existing standards. And I think we've really reached Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, where the debate has made its way from sports pages to mainstream media and public consciousness as we try to evaluate, is this a fair system, and if not, what can we do about it?
Paul, let me ask you about this athlete bill that California passed. It's the so-called Student Athlete Bill of Rights, and it helps injured students. How is that program working there, and is that something that could be a model nationwide?
I think it's just too early to know. It's not well established. But if I can just pick up on one matter that Warren raised that I think is significant. College athletes have now been paid for half a century. That ship has sailed. The issue is how do we create a mechanism that's dynamic, in which the athletes are represented and their interests are represented. It's not simply a number that is established by persons without the athletes at the table.
And one final question for you, Warren. I'm just curious, and I just really don't know this. Do athletes sign a waiver, something that indemnifies the university when they come on to play sports for that school? And if they don't, then why isn't the school fully liable for the cost of the care of an injury when it occurs?
Well, they do, and certainly one of the issues is that the NCAA, nearly 50 years ago, went to court and was very clear that they wanted to define these athletes as student athletes, thereby taking away their rights as employees, both to unionize, as Professor Haagen mentions, but also to make claims under workman's comp. That system is being challenged, both in the O'Bannon case versus the NCAA, as we look to the legal rights of the NCAA to impose on student athletes in perpetuity, as well as in the California system, where the legislature may pass a bill that actually is in direct conflict with the NCAA. And the one closing note that I would mention is the following.
Very quickly, if you will. We're running out of time.
Change is coming. It's clear that change is coming, and the question is, what role do higher education leaders want to play in evolving the system as opposed to it being imposed by the court system?
All right. Warren Zola and Paul Haagen, thank you very much for your time and perspective. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.